or treatments for emerging tropical diseases such as the Zika virus for armed forces members and their dependents. I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee, and early on we've had hearings in Houston on the Zika epicenter potential for the United States and what we need to be doing. The report would be critical to the DoD's capability to support the rapid development, production, and deployment of vaccines or treatments for tropical viruses such as Ebola and Zika to protect our first line of defense, our service persons and their families, to put their lives in danger to protect us from human and human and nature-based issues. Very briefly, the United States will expect, according to the CDC, travel-associated Zika virus disease cases 472, locally acquired vector-borne cases reported 472, through pregnant 44, sexually transmitted 10, Guillain-Barré syndrome 1. U.S. territories, travel-associated cases 3, locally acquired cases 658, total 661, and pregnant 59, Guillain-Barré syndrome 5. So travelers who are carrying the Zika virus may be a major source, but more importantly, our armed forces who may be in areas that would have the greatest impact. I believe it's very important to include them, to have this report for the Pentagon to be most effective in how they would handle our armed forces wherever they might be. My Second Amendment and Third Amendment I'll put together, Amendment number 109 and number 345, amendments that I have submitted previously and very committed to, and that is calling for increased collaboration between the Department of Defense and the National Institutes of Health to combat triple-negative breast cancer, which is found to be one of the most deadly strains of breast cancer, and particularly women of all ethnic backgrounds, but particularly Hispanics and African Americans. This amendment has passed before, and I am very, very interested in making sure that the best communication research between the DoD and the National Institutes of Health takes place. This amendment was submitted before as well, and that is the continued recognition of post-traumatic stress disorder is even coming after individuals have returned home from the battlefield. Maybe not the first year, but it's the second year, and it is armed force related, and therefore I've asked for authorization of $2.5 million in additional funding to combat post-traumatic stress disorder. Being a state which you come from, Mr. Chairman, and know that we have a sizable amount of individuals that come back from Iraq, Afghanistan, in this case with Special Forces, Syria, and elsewhere, that we do have a high number, and it is certainly not just to Texas, but all over the nation. Lastly, I want to speak to Amendment number 111. And before I came to the Rules Committee, I was delayed because I was meeting with individuals who had just returned from Nigeria to speak of the heinousness of Boko Haram. Boko Haram is now spread to Niger, Chad. This family was speaking about the fact that their whole homestead had been destroyed by Boko Haram, which is not just lending its violence to Christians now, it is Muslims, mosques, churches, businesses. So my amendment expands an amendment I offered last year, and I consulted with the staff of the Armed Services Committee to include more countries that have now been affected by Boko Haram in the Lake Chad Basin, which I mentioned covers contiguous nations in that region, Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. Specifically, my amendment calls for a report on our efforts to combat Boko Haram in Nigeria and the countries in the Lake Chad Basin by way of provision of technical training and evidence-gathering strategies, to name a few. We are limited by the Leahy Amendment, but there is the Africa Command, which I met with when I went to Nigeria. They're very eager to be supportive in trying to stem the Boko Haram is now just literally taken over the northern part of Nigeria and all the surrounding areas. They have vastly expanded. They're extensively violent. They have no limitations on their violence. And they are obviously on our terrorist list, but they've now, as all of you know, supported and have joined in with ISIL. This report can be critical in our efforts to empower and complement the efforts of the Multinational Joint Task Force. The amendment also condemns the action of Boko Haram and urges the President to ensure accountability for crimes against humanity committed by Boko Haram against the Nigerian people and their neighbors in the Lake Chad Basin. I won't continue, but it's almost similar to the Nuremberg trials by way of analogy, wherein no effort was spared to ensure the dastardly persons and acts that occurred in World War II against the many populations, including the Jewish population. No act of effort was spared. In this instance, they're killing with random abandonment. There's no justice court. There's nothing. And so any way that we can contribute to these individuals being stopped or brought to justice, I believe, is very important. I just want to make this last point. No person, whether they travel to a battlefield, later return to their native country, should have the freedom to kill without penalty. So I ask for the Rules Committee's consideration. I thank you and yield back.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.